Tom Paul, thank you so much for doing this today.
Okay.
How did you start out in this?
I think when I was a kid, when I was a teenager, I always knew that I wanted to be a film director. I'm the youngest of four, and my brother was very interested in cinema and very interested in visual arts, and kind of in his slipstream, I suppose, it was something I got interested in. And consequently, when I left school, I enrolled. The only real film school in Ireland at the time was Dunleary, so I went and studied there for a little while. But I was working already, making short films and comedy sketches and stuff like that with a friend of mine, John Carney, and it reached a point where we kind of had to make a decision about how seriously to take it, or whether to, he was in a band and he was unhappy, and I was in film school and I didn't love it, so we decided to kind of join forces and set up a company and just start work ourselves.
What didn't you love about film school?
It was it was kind of a mixed experience, but I think the fundamental thing was, that was 1993, was that it felt like there was no generation of people, older than us who had, the industry was so kind of embryonic, I suppose. I think I had a very clear idea that the only job I wanted to do on a film set was direct and write, and so it wasn't like vocational training where I wanted to become employable in the industry, and there weren't, like I say, there weren't that many examples of people who had sort of who had done what we wanted to do. I imagine as well, it's that course and that college, it was very new, so I imagine it's considerably changed, that landscape of film education in Ireland.
Yeah, and training can be such a different beast to working.
Yeah, sure. I think I had already had some experience of working myself, and the mistakes you make or the things you learn them very very effectively in that. I think I'm naturally an autodidact, so it was kind of, it wasn't the environment for me.
Okay.
And I was fortunate, I think, that I had a peer or a contemporary who I, from whom I could learn, and we could kind of teach each other, and that was.
Was that John?
Yeah.
And where had you two met?
Our families knew each other. We went to the same national school. He's a few years older than me, so we didn't really know each other as kids, but we met as teenagers and kind of had some affinity, I guess, and some common interest in around just a love of films and an interest in making them,
So after then, Dunleary, kind of, what was your first way in, or what was your first attempt?
Like I say, we had started. I bought a video camera, VHS-C camera. I think he had a high 8 camera or something like that. It was one of those formats that's now defunct. And we had just started making little, like I say, little horror films or comedy sketches or 5-minute things. And as we developed, I guess, we just thought we'd apply that methodology to something longer. And we tried to make a feature. Like, we were so young, like I was 18, 19, and we didn't know we didn't have a clue what we were doing. We just thought, so we started making this feature which we wrote, which was kind of a road movie, and the idea being that we would have one actor who was available to us. We were shooting it on weekends, who would be available for the whole shoot, and then other people coming in. It was kind of episodic and structured. So it was structured around sort of, a production method that was available to us, but it was a fiasco. We abandoned it after a little bit of shooting, and kind of went back to the drawing board and rethought our whole strategy. And but we still had this idea of making a feature for no money. And it was more uncommon in those days. Like now, everyone is doing it, and the technology has changed, and the whole kind of Kickstarter model of doing things on the credit plan, you know. But then it was more rare. So we curtailed our ambitions. We said we'll make a film that's primarily set in one location, that has a limited number of characters, that you know, that was kind of talky and theatrical, and that became November Afternoon, which we did finish. And we got a bank loan, and we, you know, called in a lot of favours, and we wrote parts for all the actors we knew. We had a cameraman who was a friend who was, you know, we did all the other jobs, all the sound recording, all the production design, all that stuff. And that was 1994. We managed to finish it by 1995, 6. And it you know, screened in a couple of festivals, and that was kind of its life. But it was, you know, it was made for like £2,000 like, or something.
And did that kind of jumpstart things?
I mean, it's not. The thing was, it was so rare for anyone to make a feature in those days that, and the country is so small and the industry smaller still, that if you did anything that showed any promise at all, I haven't seen the film in years, and I'm sure it's totally ropey, but everyone knew you straight away. So I remember we got some very good press. You know, we got some very kind reviews. Hewlin in the Irish Times kind of championed the project and sort of flagged us as people to watch, and that was important, I guess. You just need encouragement, you know, and it put us on the radar, I suppose, of the professional industry. And the next film we made was a TV movie for RTE. Was this scheme that was short-lived, actually, was to make hour-long TV movies for new kind of emerging filmmakers. And we submitted a script. Actually, it was John's script. I didn't write it. For that scheme, and we got the award, and we made this movie with David Collins of Samson Films produced it. And that was our first experience of like real professional filmmaking. Peter Robertson was the cameraman, but we had a proper crew for the first time. It was a 2-week shoot, I think. But,
and what was that like, going from, like, how different was that in terms of what you've done to?
I was I remember like the first day of shooting, sort of the first AD instructing us how, you know, even who calls action, or, you know, and that was kind of, we felt, it was a big jump in scale, but it was, it was quite a smooth transition. We, you know, once you kind of got your head around what everyone's jobs were and what everyone did, the thing of making something on your own is a really good grounding, because you know something about everything. You know something about lighting, you know something about sound, you know something about continuity and editing, and but yeah, it was interesting though that was budgeted. That was a £250,000, and our first instinct was, this is brilliant. This is a huge pot of money. Let's make a feature and then do a 52-minute cut for the deliverable. And we were talked out of that, and we were advised, no, just, you know, do the job, fulfill the brief. It'll be good for you. And actually, looking back, our first instinct was right. You know, it was a lot of money. We should have spent it better. You know, it aired, I think, a couple of times on TV and once in the cinema and stuff, but it kind of disappeared. You know, and
it could have had maybe a longer life.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
And were you directing that if John had written it?
Yes, we co-directed. That was our kind of. It was a slightly unorthodox method. Though again, it was unusual in those days, but lots of people have done it since, you know.
How do you co-direct? Like, what are the conversations that happen?
I think the idea is that if you've spent enough time in pre-production and you've kind of, what you're doing on set is just implementing your plan. And the theory was that if anyone on the crew or on the cast asked either one of us a question, they'd get the same answer. You know, that we'd kind of worked enough of it out in advance. But also then it would just be about, one person would talk to the crew and one person would talk to the actors, or we'd switch places, or I think it was mostly as well a confidence thing. We were, like I say, we were so young that it would have been very daunting to be in partnership was a kind of secure and it was more effective.
And just then, like the writing, because you write and direct. Was there an initial one that came before it? Did one come before the other, or?
No, I think I wanted to be a filmmaker. I wanted to be a director. I would, and therefore, at a certain point, I realised I'd have to learn how to write or teach myself how to write, because no one was going to give me a great script to work on. I had to, we had to do it ourselves. But I've never, I don't regard myself as a screenwriter in the sense that I'd ever write anything for anyone else to direct. That would be, I find writing hard and actually torturously difficult. And the writing is the tax you pay for getting to have the fun of making a film. It's the production part is the enjoyable bit.
What is so hard about it?
It's just very hard to do well. I don't know. Thomas Mann, I think, or someone was saying, writers are people for whom writing is more difficult than it is for other people. If you take it seriously at all and you want to do it well, and you have then it's difficult. It's difficult to write a good screenplay.
And do you have you an approach or a process if you have to write something?
It changes each time. I mean, the bit that I like the collegial aspect of filmmaking. I like the collaboration. I like the conversation, and so I'm trying to fast forward that whole process. I'm trying to get to the point as soon as I can where I'm talking to actors and locations people and producers and cinematographers and everyone else who's involved in the process. And so with John, and then later with Kieran Carney, his brother, the writing came very much out of conversation, and then you'd go away and kind of work in a solitary way on. But I've written things on my own, and it's less fun. I much prefer. I'm much more stimulated by that method. So recently, I'm writing a script at the moment with Eugene O'Brien, the screenwriter and playwright, and I just find it's a much happier experience.
And again, how do you write a script with somebody? Is it
in that case, I mean, I think someone originates it. One or other of you comes up with the idea, and he's someone, he was in my orbit, and I thought he might be a fit, and so I pitched it to him. He was interested, or it seemed promising, and then you just talk it out. You just talk and talk, but it feels less like work. You're meeting in coffee shops and you're teasing out, and it's kind of speculative at that stage, and then one or other of you writes up the notes and circulates them. You kind of agree on where you're going. And I mean, a lot of the writing work, putting dialogue or putting English on an idea is the easy part. It's all working in notes and treatments and breaking the thing down into manageable sort of stages, and then putting dialogue on it. I mean, the other example, which was a little more cumbersome because it was episodic, was writing Bachelors Walk. We did a lot of work with a script and story editor, and then we'd work on the treatments. We'd write them again and again and again, and we'd talk them out, so that then the person who's tasked with actually coming up with the 50-page script that you were going to shoot was kind of a long weekend. You just stay up and just do it, But the difficult stuff was all done in advance. It was all done in conversation and in other forms.
Bachelors Walk, then, did that come out of the initial thing you did with RTE? Is it a compliment?
Not directly, no. I think there were actually, I'm trying to remember. No, because there were different commissioning editors, actually. Having made November Afternoon and the TV movie, I think there was a thing looking back which it seemed like we had a really good instinct for kind of what was happening. That like I say, in 1993 the film board had just been re-established, and it seemed like, and there was a kind of a general, I mean globally there was kind of an indie film gold rush. So in the mid-90s to be an independent film director was a nice spot to be in.
What do you mean in terms of funding and finance?
Yeah, I mean, financially and in terms of prestige and in terms of everything, it was an appealing proposition. But I think myself and John, whether we were that conscious of it or not, we had an instinct that if we got a little bit of a head start, that the field was quite open, at least in Ireland, so that we had a feeling that there was an opportunity there to stake out a little bit of territory. And then, having made a couple of things, the difficulty then was not production, was distribution, was finding an audience for your work, and outside of a kind of festival circuit or and so the move into television came out of that idea that what we were proposing was that we would do low budget films on television, so episodic television that was stemmed from the production model we'd kind of established, and so we'd do a romantic comedy in 8 parts, shot in a similar way to the way we had been working. And again, I think it was an instinct for, that predated the kind of the big golden age of television in the first part of this century. And again, I think it was just an instinct that television had been, and again, especially in Ireland, there'd been so little Irish TV drama, there'd been so little Irish TV comedy, that if you did anything at all that showed any promise, everyone was fantastically impressed. Someone was going to do it,
And did you, again, were you directing, was it co-direction on that?
Yeah. And that was, when it was, because it was episodes, we shot it like a film, so it wasn't scheduled in blocks. It was shot, like a film in 8 parts. So we'd have, if we were in a location, if we were in the house or in the bar, we'd do all the scenes from all the episodes on, across a couple of days or whatever.
So by the time you had kind of filmed the whole thing, even though it would have been broadcast, and
we weren't chasing exactly.
Exactly.
We weren't chasing the production transmission dates. We shot it over a summer and it aired in the autumn, and we cut it. So it was a little bit tricky, but the idea was there were 3 of us writing and directing that. So sometimes, one person would be doing rewrites ahead of to get kind of ahead of the schedule. Another person would be on the floor, and another person would be in the cutting room. And if all those, if we 3 directors were all talking to each other about, this scene needs rewriting, or you need a pickup for this scene. I'm looking at the cut here, and you need another shot. It needs. It was quite flexible, so it was about us communicating smartly about what it needed. But mostly, like I say, it worked well to the extent that we had worked together in pre-production. We had conceived of the whole show together. We knew the tone of every scene and every gag and there were instances. There was an example I remember. One of the early reviews picked out a particular scene, and what was gratifying about it from our point of view, whether the reviewer was conscious of it or not, is that I think I had written the scene. Kieran had directed it on the floor, and John had come by at the end of the shoot and suggested the last line that was the great gag that got the big laugh or something. So we all felt it was our scene, that and it was, that was kind of exemplary of how it worked at its best,
And where did the idea come out of for the whole show?
Myself and John had an office on Bachelors Walk. There were two sources actually. We were renting an office when we were, I can't remember what we were working on, I think it was November afternoon, and we rented an office above an antiques shop for like £15 a week. I remember it was something tiny. And we were working there, and we liked that neighbourhood and that part of town. And then there's a house on Ormond Quay that belonged to someone we knew who's a barrister, publisher, and he sublet it into like 8 apartments, and it was a big old Georgian house, and it was kind of wrecked. It was kind of subsiding all over the place, and there were plaster coming off the walls and stuff. But it was quite atmospheric. It was always full of actors and lawyers were the two kind of populations, and it's still going actually. I played poker there a few months ago. So there's at one time or other, like probably a few thousand people have gone through that house and lived there for 6 months or a year at a time, so it has this moving population. We were at a couple of parties in that house, and we thought that was a kind of was a good setting and a promising kind of
just provided
situation. Yeah.
So the kind of the characters in the Bachelors Walk, were they loosely derived on people you'd met or knew, or?
I mean, sort of, yeah. It was very personal. It was very close to, like, we were. I was 25 when we started writing that, and we were writing about people exactly the same age as us, in similar kind of stages of life, and romantic and social and work problems. So they were, the main character was a film critic, and I was working as a film critic briefly. So I we just took lots of stuff from our own lives. I mean, it wasn't. Journalists always wanted to break it down that there were 3 writer and directors and there were 3 lead characters and who's who. It wasn't quite as clear cut as that. We took a lot from our own lives, but also from people in our orbit, and and then of course lots of imaginative stuff as well.
And did you anticipate that it would be as well received as it was?
I think we knew it was good. Yeah, I think we knew that there was an audience crying out for that stuff. We had some, like I say, some instinct for that because no one I knew watched RT shows, and it was kind of kiss of death to make an RT comedy, and there was no reason for that except that whether as an institution or there wasn't a perception that it was a place that good writers were welcome, but we had a very sympathetic commissioning editor, and they couldn't have been more encouraging. We got to do it our own way. It was really, we were a little kind of gang, and we were kind of fearless. I think I knew it would go down well. I'm not sure I thought it would have quite as wide an appeal as it did. It really, and journalists loved it actually. It really took off from a press point of view. Like they were, and from all sort of everywhere on the media spectrum, the Irish Times loved it and the Red Tops loved it, and for different reasons, But I think that was a lot to do with it had a lot of charm. It was hard to dislike, and it was the actors as well. Simon Delaney was a big discovery. Keith McElwain was. They were new, and they were, it seemed it was timely. It was just opportune. I think we were very fortunate, in the timing of it.
And when you say you did it your own way, I may have this wrong. Did you? You said you shot the first film you made on handhelds.
Yeah.
Did you go back to that at some point?
Yeah, I mean, actually, if you see the show now, it was shot on mini DV on that format. It was a Canon XL1 camera, which was a prosumer. It was kind of a a jumped up camcorder, and it was. But again, it was this idea that the only way to get production value on that kind of budget was to use the whole city as your backdrop. If you couldn't close streets and you couldn't build things, there was no carpentry, there was no standbys. The only way to get production value and sort of spectacle into the show was to take a camcorder onto O'Connell Bridge, and that had a chance to look brilliant. And it did, but it meant you had to have a very small and discreet crew that shot it. You kind of shot it like a documentary, you know. And at least for one series, before the guys were well known, everyone, you know, occasionally someone would spike the lens, or a passerby would say, you know, would get in the shot or something, but not much, you know. It was really.
And do you need permission and warrants for that sort of thing, or is it?
Yeah, sure, but I mean, it wasn't. It was. We were very lean and kind of mobile as a production. It was. Yeah, we winged it a little bit, but which was great fun. Actually, it was kind of. Yeah. It was electrifying. It was really, you know, and it was summer. We shot in July and August every summer, and it was great. It was just. Yeah, it was a very happy experience.
And in terms of then directing, like, have you a style or a way you like to do that, or?
It varies. I mean, project to project. I've an instinct for comedy that my default setting is always kind of to try and make things funny, and therefore. The emphasis is more on performance than on what the camera is doing. You know, that you're not trying to stage things for the camera. You're trying to capture the vivid and interesting and funny performance. But again, that changes. I mean, from project to project. You know, as I've got older, probably I'm. Less interested in comedy and more interested in drama, and therefore you are talking about a different kind of type of cinema, I guess. But it varies, yeah.
And like, do you rehearse? Is it a?
I think for comedy, rehearsal it can be tricky, can be problematic. You're trying to. Keep some freshness or some vitality in the performance, and not. Like, that was interesting, actually. Doing something that returned for a second series, because that had never been our conception. We'd only ever imagined that it would be a one-off, and then it was sort of so successful that even we were still editing the last episode when the first ones had broadcast. So. It became obvious that there would be an appetite for a second series, and we kind of finessed the ending of the first series to suit that. But we'd imagined it as a standalone thing. But it was interesting when we came back to do the second series. There was a problem for the performers, which is that they were suddenly aware and self-conscious about what was playing really well and what was funny about their characters and what audiences were responding to. And for us as writers and for the actors, it became very hard not to sort of respond to that. It was some self-consciousness that's kind of antithetical to comedy, that you're asking for laughs a little bit, or you're ingratiating yourself to what the audience expects. And that was something that was an interesting thing to learn, because I'd never had that that kind of feedback. And that's like for television shows that run successfully for series after series, negotiating that thing is really essential. You know, I'm thinking of kind of how a character emerges in a show that you imagine. I mean, the famous example is The Simpsons or something. So that starts off as where Bart is the main character, and pretty quickly the writers realise that that audiences are responding to, and they're real enjoyment is writing for the dad, and he becomes foregrounded and he becomes the show, and that's the positive version of that. I mean, there's a love-hate likewise. Tom Vaughan Lawler's character emerges as the kind of, and it's because the writer is, seeing how things are playing, and it's evolving in a really good way, you know.
And then within that, like, if comedy is, are there, like, what are your kind of go-to comedic shows, or in terms of comedy, whose style?
There was a few kind of formative influences but I think they would change. I mean, you know, probably like lots of people, growing up, I was a big Marx Brothers fan, big Woody Allen fan. I like a lot of Jewish American comedy, Mel Brooks, Neil Simon, lots of those people. Your tastes change, though. At a certain point, the things I find funny now probably aren't trying to be funny in quite the same way. Seinfeld was a big touchstone for us making Bachelors Walk. Todd Solondz films. There's loads. I mean, there's loads.
So after Bachelors Walk, then what was then?
I mean, that was funny because it was such a big part of our lives for such a long time. It took
How many years was it?
I mean, it was a long time in development. It was a long time before they greenlit it and they committed to actually make it. So we'd made a pilot on our own, sort of without a broadcaster attached, without any idea. It was just as an experiment, really. And that was a long time before it actually went on the air. Like, Colin Farrell was in the pilot, like, bizarrely. Pre-movie stardom. The whole thing took like 6 or 7 years.
And was that the one project you were working on at that time?
No, it wasn't. It was kind of stop and start, and then, but once it kicked into gear, it then, for the 3 years that it was on the air, that was our main project. Yeah. It felt like the end of a long cycle of, like, what had started as a kind of an apprenticeship, like, and it's like our film school were the first films we made, you know, and that's where we kind of learnt the trade, I guess, or our business. And Bachelors Walk was the culmination of that kind of a 10-year cycle, I suppose, between myself and John and Kieran, you know. And then I think one of the difficulties about being an Irish filmmaker is that there isn't an industry, or there isn't enough of an industry to kind of absorb you, that you have to self-start all the time. You have to keep kind of mustering the resources to come up with a new project, and there isn't, like in the UK or like in the States, you don't get offered anything. Like, nothing happens. It's amazing. You know, you sort of feel like you're qualified to direct episodic television or to, but it was I don't know. It was curious.
There isn't a kind of, suppose we don't make enough of it to sustain a career.
It's just a volume thing. There aren't enough TV shows, or there are, and everyone is competing for the same few jobs, I guess, that actually you realise that this is going to be the pattern of your life, is that you'll always have to self-start and begin again, and you're not quite at square one, because you've accumulated a certain amount of experience and a certain reputation and contacts and a network, and that's all kind of essential, but fundamentally, you know, the blank page and the hardback chair, you have to, you know.
And within that, has, like, going abroad ever, or is that anything?
I think one of the things about because we had some early success, the age at which that might have been an option, like if I was 25 now and I'd be considering, do I want to base myself in London or New York or LA or wherever, because we'd achieved some success and some notoriety, we were in a position, or I felt in a position where I could get stuff made. Yeah. You're very privileged and you're very fortunate to be in that spot, and to go abroad would have felt like beginning again, because and that would have felt like a step back. And so yeah, it never really, at the age where it might have applied to me, I was doing very well here, so there was nothing, that held no appeal. But yeah, sometimes I have been tempted, like I have an English agent, and it occurs to me that I should be in London, probably hustling for stuff there. But yeah, I don't know. Yeah.
But okay, so then kind of being here then and working freelance and
yeah.
Like how hard is that, or does it get easier, or?
Well, it doesn't get easier. That's the slightly disillusioning thing as you go along. It doesn't get easier, but if you're prepared to sort of cut your cloth and live a certain lifestyle, then you're afforded a chance to do your work. I mean, it's funny because I meet American film directors at festivals, and there's something very covetable about their existence, that they're based in LA and they're living in, and they're in the heart of it, and you feel they must have access to loads of sort of, and actually it turns out they're struggling just as much. Yes, there's a bigger industry and there's a bigger pot of money, but there's also many more people competing for the same bit of it. And the fact that we have a sort of a national broadcaster that's kind of reasonably accessible, and a film board that's will fund in a speculative way a project if they like the look of it or they like the people involved. That's a very good thing. And yeah, American friends cast envious eyes on the way we work here for that reason,
So within that then, and kind of starting, afresh and coming across ideas, what is it that an idea has to have for it to stick? Like, are you constantly coming up with ideas and then discarding them and pursuing certain ones? And
I think as a writer, like I say, I don't find it easy, and and therefore I'm. But you get crafty about knowing if an idea has real potential, whether it's a film or not, and sometimes they come sort of fully formed, or they're you nearly have a eureka moment. You overhear something, and it's a true life court case or something like that, and you realise that's a film, and. Otherwise, I think that there's a sense. I don't have a desk drawer full of millions of unproduced screenplays, because I haven't. Before I do that work, before I give over a year or 18 months of my life to writing a script, I really want to know that it's a film, and B, that it's a film that I can make. I've no interest in, like I say, in writing scripts for sale or for other people to direct. So I've got a sense of what kind of budget level I'm likely to be afforded, and therefore what kind of films I should be writing. So you do pursue. There's a couple of, you know, sometimes you'll go down a dead end and it'll lead nowhere, and it's kind of frustrating. But you get good at judging whether something has real potential or not. So the film I'm writing at the moment, I kind of very quickly, it was the germ of an idea that I'd heard years ago of a true story, and then I know that's a film, and a couple of other things have to fall into place for it to be realizable. But
and in terms of how it's changed for you then, so say when you made your first film, you just made it. When you were writing now, given the success, do you know it's going to be made while you're writing it? Is that you're not pitching it, or?
No. I mean, not necessarily. I'm making a judgment. I'm guessing that this is a good pitch. That this will be of interest to producers and financiers and talent and actors and everyone else who needs to come together and make film. But you're
still an active faith.
Yeah, absolutely. And your confidence kind of oscillates between massive self-confidence or confidence in the idea and its potential, and then like whatever the word is, crucifying self-doubt and shaking it. So am I totally wasting my time? What am I, doing this for?
How long then, is that process of?
Again, it depends. I mean, it totally depends. I mean, very often a thing will occur to you, and it isn't like 2 or 3 or 5 years later. Something else will click in place that makes it possible or makes it feasible. So you've all these ideas, but it's kind of that's very unconscious, that process. I had an example. The kind of case study example was Sensation, which was a real story that I heard on the radio, and it was just a mad story about a farmer running a brothel out of his family farm, and it was this tiny trial, and it didn't even make the national news. Like, I heard it on a regional radio station when I was driving the country, and a few weeks later I woke up thinking about that guy, and he was a character already, and I knew if that was the end of the story, that the beginning of the story would be interesting, and I knew that was a film, and I even had a sense of what kind of film. But that was an unusual kind of eureka moment. But I think there was a lot of research, there was a lot of thinking about it, there was a lot of refining and shifting and changing the story before I actually wrote it. It was a long time.
Was that the first, you directed that on your own?
Yes, yeah.
So was that the first time you had kind of...
Yes, basically that was mine, yeah. I did a film which I don't really consider mine, called just before that, called Wide Open Spaces, which was a very unusual circumstance. Actually, I was developing Sensation, and this film, Paul Donovan was the producer, had developed this film with another director, and it was fully funded, and it was cast, and it was kind of ready to go, and the director dropped out kind of at the last minute, and it was offered to me just as do you want to shoot this in a few weeks, and I knew that I was deferring my fee to get Sensation made, and I knew that I wouldn't get paid, and I knew that I could benefit from having another on-set experience before that happened. So I took the job sort of against my better judgment. There's no way to effectively direct someone else's project where it's been cast by someone else and it's been developed by someone else, and you're trying to kind of, it's like being a caretaker manager of a football team or something. You're trying to fit something that's not, and it's never likely to go well. But the thing you persuade yourself is like, well, if it's a triumph, then I'm a hero, and if it's a disaster, then it's not my fault. I just got here, you know.
Yeah.
But I mean, that said, with any of the, it's there's always things to be learned, whatever you're doing. There's always, out of those experiences, you make like you forge really important relationships or friendships or professional involvements with people. So there's like, it's really hard to know how things are going to play out.
And was it daunting? Was it easier? Was it fine going from co-directing to, say, then Sensation, which was yours? Was that?
Oh, I think by that stage, yeah. I mean, I had enough experience on set, and I'd done enough of kind of flying solo on Bachelors Walk and stuff that there was no difficulty around that. And also because I'd written it myself, and there was no one to gainsay what you were doing. No, I felt total confidence by then, you know. And I also that you have, by that stage, you've kind of surrounded yourself with very like-minded and sympathetic collaborators. That was a very charmed production in every respect. Like it was the right producer for the project. We were all making the same film. The relationship with I had a very close relationship with the cameraman on that, a Dutchman called Benito Strangio. Donald Gleeson was kind of essential to that project. Like halfway through the writing, he'd come into my head as a candidate to play the lead role, and then I'd written it for him, and I'd shared drafts with him, and we had talked about it a lot. So that was kind of that was a very well integrated kind of unit, you know.
And having had the germ of the idea, if you like, from this actual case, was that it then? Did you kind of say in terms of casting, or like did you find out more about that farmer?
No, I didn't actually. Sorry, I just took the premise. I willfully, whatever the word is, ignored any other aspect of the true life case. I didn't want to be hostage to the real events. And actually, as it turned out, when I finished the script, I think I contacted a journalist who had written a story about it, and just out of interest, really, and kind of also caution maybe that I wasn't, that there weren't any contentious legal aspect to that I wasn't defaming anyone or anything. And so I found out the real details, and actually it had nothing in common with my story, beyond that premise, you know. So there was no, and I wanted to be free to make up any story I could out of that.
And what was it
idea.
about the original idea that kind of struck a chord? I mean, it is like it's a.
I thought it was, well, my first thought was that it was hilarious, and then thinking more deeply about it was just fascinating. It threw up. It seemed to speak. You're always looking for a story that's kind of small and manageable in scale, but is somehow microcosmic, if that's even a word, of some larger themes or ideas or things or things that are current. So it speaks. So it's like a metaphor for a bigger issue and a bigger problem. And I think I'd been reading a lot of Michel Houellebecq, and I was kind of preoccupied with certain ideas about I guess that kind of coincidence of things, that kind of male loneliness and rural isolation, but in a 21st century context where there's also broadband internet and a kind of global sex trade. It's an interesting economy, and it just seemed as well. It was the relationship, these two people who ended up being defendants together in court, but had once been partners and lovers, and before that strangers, and so that was very peculiar, and very interesting, just to delineate, I suppose, as a relationship.
And what was the most challenging part of filming it?
It was mostly very easy. It was kind of quite, like I say, it was quite charmed. Doing the sex stuff was funny. But again, quite, once you kind of got your head around, I think I'd written a much more explicit version of the script so that anyone who signed up for it knew what they were kind of getting involved with. And actually then I was able to kind of throttle back on that, and they were grateful and reassured. But yeah, no, I knew you were asking. I knew I was asking a lot of the actors, that it's a big kind of. They've got to demonstrate some faith or some confidence in you as director, and that's around your sort of intention and your, and you've got to persuade them of that there's nothing kind of exploitative or prurient about your interest in these matters. But again, like, you'd have to ask them. But I would guess, as an actor doing that stuff, it's like buying a timeshare or something. If it goes really, if the film is great, then it was totally justified. If the film is terrible, then you feel that was ill-advised, or you were, But I think you just have to be very direct and upfront about,
And practical.
And very practical, yeah. And actually, that was helpful. That I had this Dutch cameraman, who was very, very Dutch and very Protestant about the whole thing, and very matter of fact. And he was kind of where we were more. We'd be inclined to be more squeamish, or more inclined to nervous laughter. He was quite straightforward.
Where did you film it? Was it in Tipperary? Or?
No, it was Newcastle West in North Wicklow.
Oh, okay. Is it set?
Is it Newcastle West? Sorry, what's the place? No, I'm sorry. Newtown Mount Kennedy. The reason Newcastle West was is because of that play. Newtown Mount Kennedy was the town. Yeah, I think there's always a thing when you're shooting anything in the country in Ireland, that production don't want to squander the budget on hotels and per diems, so everything gets shot within like an hour's radius of Dublin. So therefore, location writers have a map of Kildare and North Wicklow, and those are the places that are available to you.
And how did you find that place? How did you come across it?
Location Scout found me the house, yeah, and it was kind of. It might have been in my head for this. It fitted the script perfectly. Like, it was, and it gave us everything we needed. It was really practical. And actually, the farmer who rented us the place, he couldn't have been more accommodating and nicer and more helpful in terms of.
And does he move out, or how does that work if you're
I don't think he did. I can't remember actually, but. No, he was around a lot because it was a working farm.
Yeah.
But we needed, so he, they were his sheep. He's in the film wrangling them at one point. Yeah, no, it was.
There's something else there. Yeah. So, what kind of, or did anything? Because you probably start out with an idea of what it might be,
Mm-hmm.
In its evolvement and in the process of making it, and then in the final piece. Is there anything that emerged or that surprised you that?
I think I'm not sure actually. I haven't seen the film in a while, but I would guess that it's much. It seemed more emotional and more like it has a comic aspect to it, but it's not a comic film. Like I was trying to be quite. You're trying to be quite nuanced in your depiction of that thing, because there's a lot of pitfalls, like, and yeah, I think it's a much sadder film than maybe I'd envisioned. You know, that it and probably a harder sell. You know, there's a thing as a director that you're really trying to make it work for the audience who are watching it. You're very concerned with the experience of people who are seeing the film, and maybe you're doing that at the expense of the people to whom you should be marketing the film. Do you know what I mean? Is that clear? So that you can be a manufacturer or a retailer, but in fact, probably as a director in the current climate, you have to have one eye on the difficulties of distributing films and make it easier for the people who are selling them to sell them. You know, okay. So that you have to make a film that's very true to the material and works for an audience and is satisfying as a story that you're unfolding. But you're. I remember realizing when we finished it that you were kind of anyone marketing it was really hamstrung. You know, it was a very hard film to make a trailer for. It was a very hard film to make a poster for. What is this? How do you even describe it? It's got a dramatic heft, and it's got a poignance and a sadness to it, and it's also got a comic aspect. And how those two things sit slightly uneasily together.
And was it hard then, kind of that aspect of getting distribution? Or?
I mean, I think it got exceptionally well reviewed. We got into, you know, big festivals. It had this great run, you know, Toronto and London and Rotterdam, and it was kind of it was fantastically well received. But I think then in terms of its cinema release here, Element Films put it out, and that was. And I think they found it difficult to pitch and to market, you know, and even when it came to like promoting the film for me or for the actors talking about it, it's a very hard thing to describe in a sentence. You know what I mean? You know. So I think I'm more mindful of that now. I think that, like the film I'm writing at the moment, I know what the trailer looks like, and I know what the poster looks like, and I don't know whether that's, again, I don't know how conscious that is, but I anticipate it's a more commercial proposition for that reason, you know.
And that, you know, that kind of idea that is put out that Irish audiences don't always gravitate towards Irish films, is that something you found, or is it?
Well, I think, I mean, it's not something I'm defensive about. I think it's a lot of the responsibility lies with Irish filmmakers. You know, there's a reason why Irish audiences are cautious about Irish cinema, is that they've been exposed to a lot of bad Irish cinema. That said, in defence of filmmakers, the problem with starting an industry from almost nothing, you know, I'm not to disregard the generation older than me who really must have struggled unbelievably to make films in the 70s and 80s, but largely, most Irish films that you go and see are first or second films, and therefore writers, directors or producers are only just finding their feet. And you see after 20 years or whatever it's been of the amount of investment that's been made in Irish film, you only by degrees you see the fruits of that investment, and the evidence of it is the people who have managed to survive in the industry and make 2 or 3 or 4 films, they get better, you know.
Yeah.
And they get more and therefore audiences are more receptive to them. And I think, you know, when we do well as filmmakers, by and large, audiences do respond. You know.
So it's not the stories that is it more kind of, if that's a thing, is it more that the stage that we might see these films at maybe?
I don't. I mean, it's also different in the sense that the way in which people watch films is so changed. The landscape is so changed. Is that and indeed TV shows. Is that like 15 or 20 years ago, the great achievement was to get something made, and it was such a novelty to have an Irish television show that people that all on its own was interesting or noteworthy. That's no longer true, but also you're competing if something is on. You know, people don't watch things when they're on TV anymore. They watch things streamed, and they watch them on demand. And you're competing. Your TV show is not just competing with what's on BBC One that night or Channel 4. It's also competing with every other television show made in the world this year. You know, and it's very difficult, therefore, to carve out your little bit of the audience. For films, I think we're becoming smarter about identifying the audience for your movie and speaking to them and trying to find them, but it's never easy. It's not, you know.
And how important is the festival circuit? Because that has kind of exploded, and there are festivals
well, massively for the kinds of films that we're making and that we're talking about, where there's this idea in film sales where they talk about something being execution dependent. So if you're working in genre filmmaking, if you're making horror movies, for instance, there's a sort of built-in audience for horror movies. So even if you make a second-rate horror movie, it still is a commercial proposition. It still can have a life. Obviously, if you make a first-rate horror movie, the sky's the limit in terms of sort of global box office. If you make a film that is, you know, not a franchise, not a sequel, not a genre film, is a drama, is a grown-up or a comedy, then unless it's brilliant, it's worthless. Is what they're saying. So that it's very difficult to get money up front because a distributor or a sales company can acquire it afterwards anyway. So that I make my film, and if it's rubbish, it's worthless. If it's great, then it has a life, a commercial life, or a life in the marketplace. And the place where its greatness or worthlessness is assessed or described is a film festival. So that's where that happens. So you cobble together a budget from whatever sources, and you take your film to Toronto, and you get a great review, or you go to Cannes and you win a prize. And now your thing, which might have been worthless if it wasn't any good, now its worth can be. It has a currency and it has some traction in the marketplace, and that's when you start to get distributor interest, and so all the examples of Irish success stories, whether it's you know, Once or Room or, you know, they're it's up to the moment that they screen at Sundance or Toronto and win a prize. They might be worth zero. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then suddenly they're worth something.
Which is such the amount of work that goes into it.
Sure. Yeah. And there's hundreds of other films who are all in exactly the same situation. So the festival thing, the fact that the festival industry, it's because there's many more films that are are made than the market needs. You know, there's whatever number of European films are made every year, and we only actually want to watch 100. But
and is that kind of been maybe one of the biggest shifts that's happened since you've started out? It's just the amount of people.
Yeah, sure. Like I say, it was very unusual to make a no-budget film in the 90s. Like a low-budget film in 1995 was like £3 million, and it's been a race to the bottom since then. And technology has done that, and so the whole method of production has totally changed, and the volume of stuff that's getting distributed. You know.
Okay. You're directing Red Rock.
I am. I did a block of it earlier this year. Yeah.
And is that, how did that come about? How is?
Well, I mean, one of the things that, in terms of having, I don't know, if you want to call it a career, if you want to sustain a career in this country, you have to be very versatile. Has been my experience. So I have sort of. There's two strands to your career. One is the material that we've talked about, where you self-start and you write a script and you fundraise to make a film, and it's yours. But the timeline for doing that is very long. It takes a long time to raise the money to make a movie, because there's so many ways they can be financed. You know, you only have to get one yes, but you must knock on 1,000 doors before that happens. So the way that the other sort of strand to my career, and it comes out of the success of Bachelors Walk, is that I'm employable as a director of TV series. So the two kind of, I suppose, trivia came out of my relationship with Paul Donovan. But also that I'm in the frame for that, you know, I'm a candidate for that kind of work. So that's a script I haven't written, and I'm invited to or hired to direct that show. That was slightly different though, because there was I did work with the writer. I did sort of story edit the show. And I was the sole director on it, so I'm hiring all the HODs, I'm casting it, I have total responsibility for the show. Red Rock is slightly different because it has this soap of necessity, because they have to do 80 episodes a year. It's a kind of industrial process, so they're the status of the director on it is quite different. It's a show for writers and for producers, and they need directors to come in, shoot for, like, you shoot 2 days an episode. It's really fast, and your job is really just to turn pages into pictures, and you haven't cast the show, so you might have to cast a guest star or someone who's in just your episodes, but you come on board and the cast are a going concern, and they're attached from the start. So it's quite different. I mean, it's you kind of have to cut your cloth and adjust your methods to serve a production rather.
But at the same, I mean, it's brilliant that you are still directing, and it's making a living from.
Sure, yeah. Like I say, you need to be versatile, and that's like time management becomes the big part of your work life then. So last year I did that show. I wrote a script. While I was writing, I was also teaching. So you're cobbling together an income from like 5 or 6 different sources, and that's the only way to make a kind of living wage. But at Red Rock, I like, it was a very happy experience. It was difficult because it was quite early, and they weren't quite. Well, yeah, exactly. That it's so ambitious for what it's trying to do on the money they have. There's a whole production process that's being refined as they're going. So, but it was it was a good experience. I mean, the writing is really strong. The actors are lovely. There's a really good cast. Actually, I was one of the people. I was. You build up all these relationships. It's, like I say, it's such a small industry. But like there was an actor who's in Red Rock. He plays Podge, Pat Ryan, and I cast him years ago in Sensation, and then used him again in Trivia. And I love him. He's one of my favorite actors in the country. I think he's great. But no one else had ever, at least in screen work, had ever employed him. Like, he does a lot of stage work, and to see him in Red Rock kind of stealing the show, like, he's brilliant in it, and he's the writers all really like him, and they write very well for him, and there's something very kind of nice and gratifying about that, about seeing your colleagues prosper.
And in terms of directing then, like, what do you feel your strengths are?
It's a hard question to ask. It'd be for others to judge. I think I love working with actors. I think I love that conversation. I think I'm very because I teach actors as well. I'm kind of, I understand them quite well, and I'm sympathetic to their needs, and that's the huge pleasure. I think I'm very. I think I primarily I really love it. Like, I really enjoy it. Every minute on set, I love every bit of it. There's no part of it that's burdensome or a chore or annoying or, and that enthusiasm, I guess, when you're on the right thing and you're surrounded with the right people, that makes the thing very enjoyable, because it's difficult, but it goes easily and it's enjoyable. I think I'm quite calm. I think when the material is right, when I've written it myself, or it's something that I'm adding some value to, that I get I understand what it needs. I think what you're bringing is a sensitivity to that, and a kind of conceptual rigor. But in terms of if I had to put an emphasis, I'm good. I'm really good with script. I'm really good with actors. I'm on less solid ground visually, I think. Just as a temperament or as a sensibility, I've less connection, I suppose, to photography. But I don't know. I think that's a difficult question.
Somebody wanting to do what you do, if they're starting out, how would you advise them?
I think to be versatile and to be collegial, and so that you're there's a leadership aspect. The joy of directing and the real is that every part of you is being stretched. Like, every aspect of your personality is being examined, so that creatively, politically, logistically, your every aspect of your self is being tested. And to be a director is to have. There's a leadership aspect. It's got a slightly kind of paramilitary quality. It's like a campaign or something. Surround yourself with good people, I think, would be the big advice, because it's not a solitary business. However you get into it, the only chance to succeed in it, the odds are so stacked against you in terms of doing it, that the only sort of chance you have to do well is to be part of a gang. And that was my experience, was that what started out as a partnership and a gang of two, with myself and John, we met a cameraman and we became three, and then we met someone else and we became five, and then we met a whole, and the Bachelors Walk gang was the kind of I suppose the apogee of that idea. But every production forms a different gang. You form a different gang around it. You find a sympathetic actor or a producer who has enough in common with you in terms of your ambition. So it's a test of your people skills all the time. And actually, the where you do your best work is in there's a kind of necessary tension as a director between you and a producer, or between you and a co-writer, or between you and an actor, between the needs of the production and the needs of the film, and that those things are always in tension and in balance. And so you're making. But yeah, find a gang, get help, because people, and the more you go on, the more, like, you used to have a fantasy that being a director was about, that you'd stage a scene and it would be terrible and the actors would be awful, and then you'd go in and you'd say some magic, you'd whisper some formula or something like and it would suddenly all make sense to them and they'd be brilliant, and that was my impression of what a director did before I ever did it. And it's a total fantasy. It's not how it works at all. It's about inviting, I suppose. The script and the project and the premise of the project is an invitation to everyone to make their distinct and essential contribution to the thing. And actually, if you do that, if you set things up properly and everyone feels confident to make that contribution and included in that process and a stakeholder in the film, then extraordinary things happen, and they happen all over the place. And, that the camera placement that's absolutely appropriate and sympathetic and perfect to the performance being captured in the events or the staging that you've designed for the scene. When those things happen, everyone's just going on the same impulse or something, and it's some huge hive mind or something, and that's what directing is about. It's about creating a space for people and making an invitation for everyone to get involved, in that respect.
Your films that you watch, your favourite films, if you were to go back to. I gorge on things. I'm a less conscientious film watcher now than I used to be. I used to, like, the other part of my sort of film education was when I was in my late teens, early 20s. I was watching 20 films a week. Like, I would watch everything. It was just kind of staggering. I remember, I would go to, what was that video shop on Downing Street, Metropolis or Laser, and you'd get 3 films out a night and you'd just stay up all night watching them.
Probably because I have less time, I'm more selective now. But I go through phases of people. So I suppose in recent years, the Dardenne brothers were a big discovery. Like I can't remember the first film of theirs I think I saw was The Child, and I remember for 3 weeks after I watched nothing, but I watched their whole oeuvre, and yeah, they were so impressive, like just such masterful filmmakers. Who else recently? What have I enjoyed? Lots of things, but a lot. Leviathan is the best film I've seen in the cinema in the last couple of years. I think I just remember being jaw dropped by that movie. And I remember I'd seen his first film, whatever it was, 10 or 12 years ago, The Return, and I knew that's a guy who's a little bit older than me, but he's going to make a great film every 3 or 4 years for the rest of, for the next 30, 40 years. That's a master, and some of them might be more or less interesting than others, but they'll always be noteworthy. And I think I'd seen Elena, I quite liked. I didn't see, there was one other film that didn't get distribution here that is regarded as a little bit of a misstep, but Leviathan I thought was the kind of fulfillment of his obvious potential. Like, that sounds kind of condescending or something, but I just remember being so stunned by it in the cinema, and also sort of inspired and encouraged that films could still do that, and that there were still people making films that ambitious and that serious in an unserious time, or in a time that's less receptive to that kind of cinema. So that would be the recent example that would come to mind. But yeah, lots of things. I love Sam Peckinpah. I love Todd Solondz. I love Maurice Piala. I've seen recently his movies, which I like very much. There's loads.
The biggest compliment that has ever been paid to you or something about your work
there's a couple come to mind. Like I say, there was the first time I ever appeared, I think the first time my name was ever in the paper was for November Afternoon, and I remember that was such a huge deal, that because we had the feeling that we were doing this stuff sort of in private, like completely off the reservation, we were not part of anything. We weren't in the film industry. We were just two people in our, it was like, a startup or something, and to suddenly get the affirmation from a respected and articulate film journalist that this was, first of all, that this was a film, and that it was an interesting film, and more importantly that these guys were evidently talented and needed to be watched. And that was huge looking back. Like, it was absolutely essential. And I think absent that encouragement, that's an example where the press thing can really affirm, you and what you're up to in some. To get that imprimatur was very important. Anytime anyone gets what you're doing and responds to it on its own terms, where they connect, kind of at the level of, I suppose, a sensibility or consciousness, because that's my experience. The affinity you have as a viewer for films you love is that you feel some profound connection with the maker, and they don't know you exist, and you never, so anytime you see evidence of that, anytime audiences or critics or anyone really responds to the thing on its own terms, that's very gratifying,
And have you, when a film, so say when Sensation played, have you gone to screenings where it's just general audience and that you just kind of, and it's kind of different reception sometimes to a...
Rarely actually. I mean, I'd usually at festivals and stuff, I'd sit for the first 5 minutes and make sure that the levels were okay and the projection was fine, and then there's something quite painful about that as well. And also you've seen the film so many thousands of times by then that you're kind of done with it. But no, I don't mind meeting them afterwards. I have no difficulty with that. Yeah, I have had that experience. If you're going to watch things, watching comedy is quite good from that point of view, and because the laughs you get, the sound of an audience who's bored at a drama is exactly the same as the sound of an audience that are totally absorbed by a drama. So there's no value in sitting in the room with them. Whereas the quality of a laughing audience, because the things audiences laugh at are always very interesting, because laughter is kind of unpoliced. So people laugh nervously. People laugh to affirm that they get the joke, in quotes, or that they, and then other people laugh just because other people are laughing. It's kind of infectious or contagious. But to discover, to hear the laughs that you're expecting, and also the unusual and unexpected laughs that you weren't anticipating, is very intoxicating. Like, it's really brilliant. Yeah.
And if you hadn't done this, what would you have done?
I have no idea.
Did you fill out a CAO form?
I did. I must have. Yeah, but I left school at I've gotten basically no education. I did a junior cert, and I because I knew I was going to Dun Laoghaire, it was all a portfolio and an interview, so I didn't do my leaving cert. What else would I be doing? I don't know actually, because I think I'm not sure how fortunate a thing that is, but it was true of me that at 15 I knew that what I wanted to do in life, and I haven't really deviated from that path. Like I say, I've done other stuff that's sort of complementary activities, like teaching, like film journalism. I'm kind of unemployable. I've nothing else to offer the economy than more films and TV shows.
Thank you very much,
Cool.
Tom Hall.